Okay.
Oh, you're in the picture.
That means I can't get up.
Alright, everybody sit back and just imagine that you're at home on your couch watching TV or maybe reading a book when all of a sudden you start having severe chest pain and shortness of breath. What do? You're all alone and no one is there to help you. So naturally you reach for the phone and dial 911, knowing that an ambulance will show up very shortly with professional emergency medical technicians like myself with all the appropriate equipment to help you feel better and get you to the hospital. Now take a step back and imagine the same situation only 70 years ago. You would reach for the phone, but you would find that you couldn't dial 911 because it was not established yet. So you would have to rely on family and friends, but you're alone. So then you call the hospital and they'll send an ambulance, but it'll take about 30 minutes to get to you. And when they do get there, all they can do is transfer you to the hospital because they're not trained and don't have any equipment to help you out. A lot of us take the emergency system for granted. We just assume that they have been and always will be there to help you. I'm here to inform you that this is not the case. The emergency system is just now laying a very good foundation. I feel everyone needs to know of the emergency system's progress over the years to appreciate what we have today. Like everything else, the EMS system had to start somewhere. This system can be traced back all the way to when the Romans and Greeks used chariots to remove injured soldiers from the battlefield. Then in 1797, a French military surgeon named Baron Dominique Jean Lery of Napoleon's army saw a need and implemented the first pre-hospital system designed to triage and transport injured soldiers from the battlefield to the aid stations. Years later, the Americans imitated this system during the Civil War. This became the first recorded use of a field triage system in the United States. The United States Congress formally established an ambulance system for the armies through the Ambulance Corps Act of 1864. Then in the late 1860s, hospitals in Cincinnati and New York City saw what the military was doing and decided the civilian world needed ambulances too. So they started their own ambulance services using horse-drawn carriages to transport their sick and injured. Then in 1899, the first use of an automobile was credited to the Michael Reese Hospital in Chicago. These automobiles got up to a whopping 16 miles per hour. Now, prior to World War II in the 1940s, hospitals provided most ambulance services for larger cities. But during the war, manpower became very short, so they had to turn over the reins of ambulance services to the fire departments and the police departments. Now, since there was no training required to work on the ambulances, but if you worked in the fire department and you got in trouble, being assigned to the ambulance for the day was part of an unofficial punishment. Municipal fire departments later on started volunteer squads during the war to help out with the manpower shortages. And these volunteer squads eventually replaced the hearses that ran out of funeral homes. So in order for a service or company to grow, what has to happen? Research and training. Until the late 1950s and early 60s, the ambulance's main service was transportation, but this was rapidly changing. Back in 1909, the American Red Cross started a training program for first aid, but nothing ever really kicked off until 1958 when Dr. Peter Safar demonstrated mouth-to-mouth ventilation to be the superior methods to any other ventilations, and this gave way for more research and training. Now, for a side note, for his research, he would anesthetize his surgical residents and allow Baltimore firefighters to actually perform ventilations on the residents to find out which method worked best. Later on, two clinical advances led to the realization that rapid response to cardiac emergencies greatly increased the overall outcome of patients. The first development was by the researchers at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, who produced the first portable defibrillator in 1959. Then came the perfection of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, also known as CPR, in 1960. These two advances laid the foundation for the course known as ACLS, or Advanced Cardiac Life Support. Now, with all these new advances, the government finally had something solid to build upon and start legislation funding for the EMS system. The first was the Highway Safety Act of 1966, which established the Department of Transportation. Through this act, the DOT was given the authority to improve the EMS by implementing new programs and starting a training program for personnel. States were also required to develop their own regional EMS and funds were being supplied by the Highway Safety Program. Next was 911 was designated for emergency use only in 1968. And then in 1973, the Emergency Medical Services System Act authorized funds for research and training and also made money available for the regional EMS. Now with all this funding, training programs started popping up everywhere. First was in Miami, Florida. Then in 1975, the DOT finally established a national basic training course for the EMTs to improve competency of all ambulance personnel. By 1977, all states had adopted the DOT courses. So far, all research and training had been focused on adults, and no one had started anything for children. Well, in 1984, the Emergency Medical Services for Children program started up, and their main focus was all the emergencies that could happen for children. Next, they had to come out with a set of standards for the ambulances. So in 1999, there was a commission on accreditation of ambulance services that did set standards. With all the new training and advances in the EMS world, everyone started look into it and said, hey, we got this new thing growing, let's all jump in. Throughout the 20th century, fire department organizations pulled together to expand the EMS system. In 1995, Los Angeles City Fire Department started their own EMT assessment and paramedic engine. And then in 1996, New York City Fire Department took over the New York City EMS. In 1977, San Francisco and Chicago started their own paramedic engine, and many other cities followed suit. In this same century, entrepreneurs saw the need and saw money in making private ambulance companies. So now everywhere you go, you see either city or privately owned ambulance companies. So whenever you're out and about, you will at least see 1 or 2 ambulances driving around. And at least now you know that you will always have a trained emergency medical technician to help take care of you and transport you to the hospital. So with all this said, let's put all this back into perspective. Think about your grandparents' early childhood, about 70 years ago. The only thing their ambulances could do was transport them to the hospital. And now, however many years later, here we are, and we just expect the EMS to show up and treat us and get us to the hospital. It's amazing progress. Thank you.
Yay.
And my pictures, I forgot.